Welcome to British Airshows 99, the review that brings you the very best of this year's airshow action from around the country. At the beginning of the season, it looked as if we might be in for a lean year, with many shows either cancelled or looking uncertain due to the crisis in Kosovo. But, as you'll see in this review, that was far from the case, with all the variety and excitement that has become the hallmark of the British Airshow season. But first, we must begin on a sad note, for Mark Hanna, Managing Director of the Old Flying Machine Company and leader of the Breitling Fighters, was tragically killed whilst flying at an airshow in Barcelona, just as the season was reaching its close. The numerous appearances of the Breitling Fighters in this review is a testament to the vital role Mark played in the airshow scene, one which will be left much poorer by his absence. It's always refreshing after a long winter of no flying to open the display season at Duxford, a wartime base for Spitfires and Hurricanes, as well as home to the US 8th Air Force Museum. The pilots are briefed that the weather is good and that they'll be flying in front of a record 16,000 people. Most of the aircraft at the show are based on the airfield, although regular visitors like the Grumman Avenger of Tony Haig Thomas are always welcomed by the crowd. Formations of warbirds are a regular feature of Duxford's airshows. Here's the Hellcat, the Wildcat and the Corsair, sporting its new colours as part of the Old Flying Machine Company's Breitling Fighters. The Hellcat flies in the colours of US Navy Lieutenant Alex Vracu, who scored 9 kills with her in 1943. This Wildcat is the only one of its kind flying today in Europe, living up to its reputation as a rugged but highly manoeuvrable fighter. And this is the Douglas Skyraider flown by Stephen Gray. It was the largest single-engined aircraft designed during the Second World War. Launched from aircraft carriers, they were used mainly for dive bombing and ground attack. This style of flying is a bit different for Rolf Meeum. When he's not flying the Breitling Mustang, he operates Boeing 767s for Scandinavian Airlines. This glorious North American B-25D Mitchell bomber served with the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1943. Today, it flies in the colours of an aircraft from 98 Squadron, which operated during the Normandy landings in 1944. A Duxford show wouldn't be the same without the Spitfires. Here, 4 of them are patrolling, waiting for the enemy to appear. And here it comes, low and fast in the shape of the ME-109 with Nigel Lamb at the stick. Dogfights like this were common in the summer of 1940, when as many as 60 Spitfires and Hurricanes operated out of Duxford during the Battle of Britain. And this is one of the rare surviving Mark 16s, powered by the US-built Packard Merlin engine and painted in a post-war RAF silver scheme. The next airshow in this review again took us up the M11, this time to North Weald. It's the second of Intrepid Aviation's annual airshows, and the theme this year was Women in Aviation. And no airshow would be the same without those intrepid, pardon the pun, wing walkers from the utterly butterly barnstormers. On the press day, Julie Gibson, an RAF Hercules pilot and the first woman to be awarded her RAF wings, was also on hand to lend support. Among the highlights of a packed display programme was Gennady Elfimov performing a heart-stopping takeoff. Gennady is flying a Yak-52 from Skytrace, the aerobatic school near Birmingham, which is operated by veterans of the Soviet Air Force. Gennady finishes his explosive routine with his signature manoeuvre, a reverse half-Cuban straight into the landing. Caroline Grace is one of the best-known women on the airshow circuit, but she's not normally seen flying this Spitfire Mark V. Her own rare Spitfire T9 is unserviceable, and she was checked out on this aircraft just hours before the display. It didn't seem to make any difference though, as Caroline gave her usual polished performance. This exotic aircraft is a Dornier DO-36 Alterheim. Its remarkable shape is dominated by one of the longest noses in aviation. It used to fly with the Swiss Air Force and has recently been restored at North Weald. It was displayed by Clive Davidson. Here's one of the tallest men in aviation preparing to fly one of the smallest jet aircraft ever built. Bob Thompson is an ex-RAF pilot who's now chief pilot for Martin Baker, the world-famous manufacturer of ejector seats. His chosen mount is the Folland Gnat, the RAF trainer that was used by the Red Arrows for their first 15 years and gave thousands of RAF pilots their first taste of jet flight. They've got a new name this year, the St Ivel Utterly Butterly Barnstormers. Only one of the Boeing Stearmans made it to North Weald this year, but it was still a crowd-pleasing sight. The appearance of 4 gazelles and a single lynx at an airshow can only mean one thing: the Blue Eagles have arrived. Led this year by Sean Wyatt, the Blue Eagles are the world's best helicopter display team. The 5 pilots are all qualified instructors in the Army Air Corps and now have something over 18,000 hours of flying time under their belts. Watch out for the trademark manoeuvre of the Lynx, flown by Warrant Officer 2 Bob Lewis, the remarkable backflip. One of the best-known female pilots is Diana Britton, the National Women's Aerobatic Champion. Not only is she one of the best known, she's arguably the best aerobatic pilot in the UK. Learning to fly in 1980, Diana became a member of the British team in 1986. She hasn't missed a year since and has earned trophies and awards galore all around the UK and Europe. Diana flies an Extra 260, one of the greatest aerobatic aircraft in the world, and she performed her gyroscopics routine, a refined form of aerobatics. In complete contrast to Diana Britton's Extra is Tracy Martin's Bell 47 helicopter, named Jean Mash after the famous television series. Tracy has owned the helicopter for 10 years and displays it all across Europe. Anna Walker flew a stunning aerobatic routine in her classic Booker Youngman. Anna has been flying for 20 years, and for much of that time has been flying in both solo and team displays. She also flies other aircraft, including her own Piper Cub and a rare Booker Youngmeister, the younger brother of the Youngman she flies today. This Youngman may be a 60-year-old design and have half the power of modern aircraft, but it still rates in aerobatic competition. For the proof, just watch Anna's display. Taking off now is the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight's Hurricane 2C, believed to be the last Hurricane to enter service with the RAF. It was followed by the Spitfire Mark IIA, the oldest Spitfire in the world. Last of the BBMF trio into the air was the famous Avro Lancaster, here at North Weald to celebrate the anniversary of the Dam Busters raid, which took place on the 16th of May 1942. For the first few years after the war, this Hurricane became a film star, appearing in Reach for the Sky, Angels 1-5, and the BBC's classic series War in the Air. It then became a founder member of the BBMF in 1957. This Spitfire actually saw service during the Battle of Britain. It was restored to airworthiness some 27 years later to star in the film Battle of Britain. It now carries the colours of a Spitfire from number 603 City of Edinburgh Squadron to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. And of course the Lancaster. 57 years ago to the day, aircraft from the newly formed 617 Squadron bombed the Great Dams of Germany. Today it flies in tribute to the crew of the 8 aircraft lost on that raid. Now we come to the beginning of the great North Weald finale. First up, this rare ex-Luftwaffe Rockwell OV-10B Bronco, making its debut on the UK airshow scene. Owned and flown by Bernard Carrier, the Bronco's home is at a museum in Montélimar in France. Following on behind was a T-28 Fennec, flown by John Romain. And here's the Breitling Mustang, instantly recognisable from the yellow nose paint. Flying the Curtiss P-40 Kitty Hawks were ex-Red Arrows leader and Old Flying Machine Company founder Ray Hanna and fighter collection owner Steve Gray. Here's the first of 3 aircraft designed by North American. The Bronco was a light-armed reconnaissance aircraft that was used for forward air control in Vietnam by the US Marine Corps. This one was built as a target tug for the Luftwaffe. This Fennec was built specifically for the French Army for light ground attack in Algeria. It was a derivative of the Trojan trainer used by the US Navy, Marines and the Air Force. And now the classic Mustang. Powered by the Packard-built Merlin engine, it became the greatest fighter of the war. It's testimony to the quality of this outstanding fighter that there are still so many flying around the world. The scenario here is that an enemy camp has been found. The Bronco and the T-28 were scrambled to investigate. They made several passes over the enemy trucks just to make sure. Now it's the turn of the P-40s to mount the attack. Hanna's P-40E had only recently returned from New Zealand, where it had been a resident since 1942. It carries the markings of number 14 and 15 Squadrons Royal New Zealand Air Force, as they were in 1943. Gray's P-40N had been in England since January 1998, after it was traded for a Spitfire Mark 14. It carries the colours of the US 11th Squadron of the 343rd Fighter Group, with a wacky tiger's head motif. Their attack sent flames shooting into the sky and blasts of heat in the direction of the crowd. As the P-40s flew off to Duxford, the curtain came down on the show. It was another well-organised show by Brendan Walsh and his team from Intrepid Aviation. Also flying at North Weald was the Harrier GR7, celebrating 30 years in RAF service. It was also the 33rd birthday of Dan Johnson, this year's GR7 display pilot. Dan talked to us about displaying the Harrier.
I think flying-wise, any Harrier pilot has the qualifications to do the job, but a little bit of experience, a little bit of maturity. You have to be a sensible chap who's not going to take too many risks, really, I think is what we're after, as well as flying ability. I was selected to do the display back in November, so I spent about 2 months thinking about the displays and how I was going to run it, thinking about the aircraft we were going to use, and we have performance indicators for the engine as well, and we have to monitor the engine very closely, being a single-seat engine. I start off in the simulator, and I build up my sequence in the sim, and then it takes about 2 months of flying about 4 or 5 times a week, doing a display about 4 or 5 times a week, to get up to the level that I'm at now. And that really what we're concentrating on. We start off at height, so it's nice and safe if any manoeuvres go wrong, and then we gradually work down to display height. So safety is the biggest aspect really, and then we're looking to polish it after that. Each year, each display pilot gets his choice of what manoeuvres he wants to fly and how he wants to fly it. We have to stick within the certain rules and regulations, and there are only certain manoeuvres we're allowed to do. So really it's just your own decision as to how you want to run it. And this year I've chosen for my full display in good weather to do more looping manoeuvres, to do more vertical manoeuvring, and see whether the crowd enjoy that. And then when it comes to the hovering side, again I've just rearranged the manoeuvres so that people don't sort of say, oh, that looks exactly like last year's. All right, that didn't do that last year. There are several things. I'm trying to demonstrate the capability, the manoeuvrability of the aeroplane, and how it's unique that in fact they can hover and go slowly. So I demonstrate by going fast to going slow as well, so demonstrate to the public what the actual aeroplane can do. Then I demonstrate what the pilot can do. So the aim there is really to show you that any Harrow pilot can do what I'm doing. It just takes a little bit more training for me to do it. And then my aim really is to provide a safe and enjoyable display which everyone will enjoy. My favourite manoeuvre, I think the hardest manoeuvre for me to fly is the steep acceleration. After I do my 100-foot fly past at over 550 miles an hour, I come in and I hover in front of the crowd. The next hardest manoeuvre really is the one I really enjoy, is turning away from the crowd and putting the airplane into a steep climb, which actually is using all the aircraft performance, all the engine performance, and is probably the most demanding part of the display for me to fly.
On a glorious day in June, they threw the doors open to the public for an open day so that they could see the jets being put through their paces.
I first knew about it when I was in my teenage years, really, or early 20s, when Mike Carlton started it. And I got involved last year purely as a passion to keep vintage jets flying. and really Jet Heritage has such a wonderful global reputation that was started by the likes of Mike Carlton and Eric Hayward, that it was just a privilege to get involved with a company like that.
Dan Griffith is the Jet Heritage chief pilot.
The military flying was obviously a different sort of flying. It was an operational environment, and I suppose it was very exhilarating from the fact that it was so operational. In the civil world, the display flying, I think, is the closest you can get to that operational environment, and the adrenaline is the same, without doubt, particularly when you're very low to the ground, very fast, as in a Hunter, say, which would be doing 600 knots at 50 feet. So it's an exhilarating aircraft.
Now this may look strange, but Dan's concentration is 100% as he walks through the display routine.
It's very easy as a pilot, as a display pilot, to try and show yourself off, but that's not really what the public are after. They're after good picture-taking shots, lots of different profiles, different angles, different speeds, different noises, and just so that they can get involved in the air show themselves, really.
Pride of the fleet are the Meteor and Vampire, which regularly fly together as the historic pair. The Meteor is an NF-11. It was built in the early 1950s as one of the 15 different marks of Meteor, and the first to be purpose-built as a night fighter. The Vampire is a T-55, a two-seat trainer that was originally operated by the Swiss Air Force. As well as the historic pair, the collection has 5 Hunters, a Venom, 2 Jet Provosts and a fallen Gnat. But Glen Lacey isn't finished yet.
Yes, we have a Seahawk we'd like to put back in the air, an A4 Skyhawk, a Sabre F-86, and we're hoping to put the Sea Vixen in the air as well.
On these hot summer days, other jet owners bring their aircraft to take part in the open days. This Canberra is privately owned by Peter Gill. Sadly, Jet Heritage has had to go into receivership, though the aircraft will continue to fly. Old Warden in Bedfordshire is the home of the Shuttleworth collection, which depicts the history of flight from the 1900s to the 1940s. Many of the aircraft are sole surviving examples, which makes the collection one of the most interesting in the world. Throughout the summer, a series of sunset displays are held at the charming grass airfield. The combination of rare old aircraft and vintage cars makes for a very relaxed atmosphere. Weather is always a critical factor at airshows, and given the fragility of the Shuttleworth collection's aircraft, the weather is particularly critical. At sunset too, the conditions were reasonable, enabling the display to run more or less as planned. One of the first to fly with this 1929 Parnell Elf. Designed to compete with the de Havilland Moth in the private and club market, only 2 of these Elves were built, of which this was the first example. This is a reproduction of a Hawker Cygnet built to compete in the light aeroplane trials at Limp in 1924. Although the type only achieved places in the 1924 competition, it did win the Daily Mail prize of £3,000 in the open handicap race held at Limp in 1926. The 1920s and 30s were known as the era of the biplane, and yet monoplane designs, such as this BA Swallow, received an enthusiastic response from the club flying market in Britain when it first flew in 1933. More than 100 were built. Some even saw limited service in the Second World War as trainers, as well as being used as an unofficial hack for RAF station commanders. The Shuttleworth collection features many of the aircraft that were used as trainers by the RAF between the wars. The earliest is this Avro 504, which first flew in 1913. This is one of the greatest British aircraft of all time, continuing in service until the 1930s. It's fondly remembered by many thousands of people as not only the aircraft in which they first learned to fly, but also the aircraft which provided their very first flight. The 504's replacement was the Avro Tutor, which made its public debut in the New Types Park at the 1929 Hendon Airshow. By far the largest order for the Tutors was from the RAF, and many pilots who flew in the early years of the Second World War learned their craft in Tutors. Although nearly 800 were built, this is the only flying example left. By the late 1930s, the RAF was re-equipping with the new monoplanes, such as the Spitfire and the Hurricane. A new monoplane trainer was therefore required. The result was the Miles Magister, which remained in service until 1948. It was also used by the Fleet Air Arm and the British Army, as well as equipping 16 elementary flying training schools. The other aircraft used for training during this period was the de Havilland DH-82 Tiger Moth. As well as equipping reserve and elementary flying schools during the 1930s, the Tiger Moth also played an important reconnaissance role for the British Expeditionary Force during the Battle of France. Following the evacuation of Dunkirk, Tiger Moths were earmarked for a possible offensive role as a light bomber. Thankfully for the air crews, they never had to carry out bombing missions. This year also saw the return to the skies of an old Shuttleworth favourite, the Hawker Hind. This 1934 light bomber is the only surviving example and flies in the colours of 15 Squadron, Royal Air Force. The Shuttleworth collection is famous for its aircraft of the Edwardian era. These rarely fly as they are extremely difficult to handle in anything but a perfectly still summer's evening. At the third sunset evening, a record crowd was well rewarded for its patience. First, the Avro triplane flew to mark the 90th anniversary of A.V. Rowe's first design. Although this is a replica, built for the film Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, it's still very fragile and a joy to see in the air again. But then, with the light fading fast, the crowd's attention turned to the sound of sputtering engines. Making their slow but dignified way down the runway were the de Perdessin and Blériot, the oldest flying aircraft in the world. Actually, flying's not strictly true, as these days they're limited to a few hops and jumps in deference to their great age. That said, the crowd was stunned when Chief Pilot Andy Sefton got the de Perdessin well and truly airborne for what seemed like an age. Few could remember having ever seen it get so high. Finally, the Blériot had a go, unleashing all of its 25-plus horsepower in a desperate bid to get airborne. It managed a short hop, but it was more than enough to leave the crowd well and truly satisfied. Cloudless blue skies are the hope and dream of every airshow organiser. There's nothing worse after months of arrangements than to wake up to rain and cloud. But at Biggin Hill in Kent, on the morning of Thursday 24th of June, Jim Maitland couldn't be happier. As chairman of the 37th International Airfare Committee, he looked out onto perfect weather conditions and soaring temperatures, and he knew that a great airshow was in prospect. Thursday was press day. Some of the pilots performed something special for the next day's papers. The pilots gathered each morning for the briefing. Among them were Anatoly Kuvocha, leader of the Russian Su-27 team, Christine McGee, one of the two Gaylord pilots, the Breitling Fighters team, and Simon Meade, leader of the Red Arrows. This is a Soko G2A Gallo, or translated into English, Seagull. It's a jet trainer and the only one in Britain, a lucky survivor from the Yugoslav Air Force. It was flown out of Bata Janica Air Force Base near Belgrade just days before the bombing started. Although it was built in Yugoslavia, there's lots of British equipment on board. It's got 2 Martin Baker ejection seats and a Rolls-Royce Viper engine. It now resides at North Weald and is a welcome addition to the airshow circuit. Our cameras joined Sasha Achimovic as he puts the Galeb through its paces. This is the Tornado F3, the fighter version of the main strike weapon of the Royal Air Force, the Tornado GO1. This year the display F3 is provided by 56 Squadron from RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire. It's flown by Flight Lieutenant Tony Parkinson, who's been in the RAF since 1983 and clocked up over 1,000 hours on Phantoms before transferring to Tornadoes. In the back seat is Flight Lieutenant Dave Hake, who's been on Tornadoes for 6 years and is an instructor at 56 Squadron. The Breitling Fighters team were also out in force at Biggin Hill. Of course, most of the aircraft are well known to regular airshow goers. They come from the stable of the old flying machine company based at Duxford. The Corsair, the Mustang and the ME-109. One new addition this year is the P-40E Kitty Hawk, flown by Ray Hanna. The yellow noses are not there as one might expect, because they are the house colours of sponsor Breitling, but as part of the original squadron markings. Airshows have a habit of throwing up some weird and wonderful sights. Dave Evans and his Mitsubishi Red Zebra team were a sight to behold.
Today we're aiming to land this aircraft on top of this trailer. It's a 40-foot long trailer, it's 8 foot wide, which is 4 inches wider than the undercarriage. So weather permitting, we will be landing on the trailer.
They tried a number of times to coordinate the landing. On their last attempt they got closer than ever. Remember, the platform is only 8 feet wide, giving just a few inches clearance each side for the wheels of the Super Decathlon. I reckon a touch and go is as good as any landing on this pass. We've already seen the Harrier GR7, but the naval version, the FA2, also made a rare appearance from its base at Yeovilton in Devon. It's only when you see the two different Harriers together that the differences are really noticeable. An aerial ballet from these two aircraft is a fine way to round off the Harrier's 30th anniversary celebrations. And now, as they say, for something completely different, but no less elegant. This Microlease Extra 300L is flown by Brian Lacombe. Brian is the most experienced aerobatic pilot in the world, and you can see the fruits of his years of labour from over 1,800 public displays in this classic performance. Brian flies one of the world's premier aerobatic aircraft. The Extra 300L has all the attributes. A lightweight airframe combined with a massively powerful engine. This gives the speed of roll, climb and turn demanded by a top aerobatic pilot. Stand anywhere near these monsters and you can feel as well as hear the power. They are the Sukhoi Su-27P flankers of the Russian test pilots team. They come from the Gromov Research Institute at Zhukovsky Air Base near Moscow. That's all a bit of a mouthful, really. What's important is that they perform one of the most exhilarating displays ever seen at the airshow. The aircraft are stripped-down display versions of possibly the world's greatest fighter. They turn like no other aircraft. That means they're a real handful in a dogfight. They can fly at Mach 2+ and carry an awesome payload of weapons. But the West has never had to take them on in anger, so we can sit and watch this truly spectacular display. Team leader is Anatoly Kovotcher. He's set a standard of display by which all other fast jet pilots are judged. First on the MiG-29 and now on the Su-27. And the pairing of pilot and aircraft is pure perfection. If further proof were needed, Anatoly won the trophy for the best flying display at Biggin Hill for the 3rd time in the last few years.
Whoa, that was a low pass, wasn't it?
The Hercules is vital to Britain's armed forces. Wherever they go, a Hercules is sure to be right behind, bringing in stores, jeeps, reinforcements, or even a tank. And this crew gave the crowd a demonstration of the Hercules' tactical prowess. You can truly appreciate the power of the Hercules when you see it perform a short landing. The second it touches down, on go the brakes. That means it can land, if necessary, on a strip less than 1,000 feet long. A great help when flying in and out of small remote airfields. As soon as the Land Rover is out, the Hercules is off again. The less time it spends on the ground, the better chance there is of getting off unscathed. And to round off the display, the steep caisson approach, a technique developed by the US pilots in Vietnam to confuse the enemy and to keep away from the ground fire. Here comes the Royal Jordanian Falcons, the aerobatic display team that was set up personally by the late King Hussein in 1976. An enthusiastic pilot himself, the King chose the Falcons to be roving ambassadors for his country, a role they fulfilled to perfection ever since. Flying their extra 300s, the Falcons performed another tight, precise display at Biggin Hill. These are the Aerostars, the largest civilian aerobatic team on the circuit. Formed and still based at North Weald, the team fly a mix of Yak 50 single-seat and Yak 52 two-seat competition aircraft. They're led by Andy Hammond, who has taken the team to Grand Prix glory by winning the FAI event in Switzerland last year.
An exciting manoeuvre.
A major theme of the Biggin Hill weekend was the 35th anniversary of the Red Arrows. Starting the celebrations, though, was a solo display by Dave Room and the Delta Jet's Black Hunter. Black painted Hunters were always the mount of the Black Arrows, the Treble One Squadron predecessors of today's famous team. They left their mark on aerobatic history with a 22-ship formation loop at Farnborough in 1958. The Hunter, of course, is an airshow favourite in its own right, showing off the power and grace that made it one of the most attractive frontline fighters of its day. This aircraft is based at Kemble in Gloucestershire, the original home of the Red Arrows. Joining the Reds for the next part of the celebrations was the Folland Gnat, the first mount of the Red Arrows, followed by the Hunter. Cameras mounted in both the following aircraft give a unique view of this special anniversary flypast. As the Hunter and Gnat pull away from the formation, the Red Arrows put smoke on, go. They form up for their signature formation, the Diamond 9. They then create the Big Vixen and perform the Big Vixen roll. The formation part of the display over, the Red Arrows perform some hair-raising and dynamic sequences.
To the whirlpool.
The individual run and breaks bring down the curtain on this review of the 1999 Biggin Hill Airfair, leaving us time to wish the Reds happy birthday and congratulations to Biggin Hill for another stunning airshow. The 1999 PFA rally took place in July at its traditional home of Cranfield. Aircraft from throughout the UK and Europe flew into this Bedfordshire aerodrome for an event put on by the Popular Flying Association. Over 1,500 aircraft flew in for the rally over the 3 days. At times the sky was full of arrivals. Air traffic control does an impressive job of coordinating so many landings in such a short space of time. Although the event is primarily for light aircraft and home builds, some larger visitors can be seen. Once the aircraft has touched down, the pilots check in before moving to their luxurious accommodation. This year the organisers decided that there would be no flying display in order to keep the airfield open longer for arrivals. This, however, did not mean that the crowds had nothing to watch. Every arrival and departure was carefully noted in someone's log. One aircraft attracting a lot of attention was this futuristic-looking design.
This aircraft is a Berkut. It's a derivative of a Rutan Canard. It's retractable. It's got a Lycoming IO360 engine. It's carbon fibre construction, typically carbon fibre. It's quite benign. The handling's very solid. It's not particularly sensitive in any means. The controls are very well damped. It's quite fast. It's a very clean aeroplane. It's a very efficient aeroplane. It's all the things that the Rutan design objectives try to make. At the top end of the range, we've been as fast as 238 knots with it in a dive to clear VNE. If we fly absolutely flat out and overspeed it, it'll do 222 knots.
Another high-tech aircraft at the rally was this Esprit, a Formula One racer designed by Valentino Fry using advanced materials.
The plane is brand new. I just finished all the test flights, and that's the first time being abroad. So I found the way up to Cranfield. The materials composite, the fuselage and wings are moldless built, and the spars are made in carbon, and the top of the fuselage is built in molds. Stall speed is 54 knots, and cruising speed at 75% is around 160-65 knots, and the maximum level speed on sea level, it's 185 knots. Design speed is 240 knots.
The PFA Rally is a great place for people building their own aircraft to get valuable information, as well as sharing their experiences with other home builders. New designs are on show to be thoroughly inspected, and there's lots of market stalls for that special something for your aircraft. Or you can just watch the weird and wonderful aircraft. Not all aircraft at the rally are high-tech.
This is the Taylor monoplane, the original Taylor monoplane, 40 years old tomorrow. It took about 18 months to build, and my father designed it actually in 1956, but it took a year to get materials ready, and then 18 months to build, which actually took place in our first floor flat in Ilford. So it was built actually in the lounge with us spread round it, sort of eating and living a normal life as such, if you can call that normal.
Another vintage home build was this Shield XYLA, designed and built by Yorkshire headmaster George Shield in the 1960s. It was recently restored by Concorde pilot Ken Snell.
I mean, we took an aeroplane on that was really just a fuselage and a couple of wings and an engine in a corner of a shed. And we had two black and white photographs to go on what it looked like in 1968. And hence all the metalwork you can see here was all done with cardboard templates from really only two black and white photographs. That's all we had. It's an old design, but it was a one-off design, and it was stressed to be fully aerobatic in its day. And in those days, all the sums were done by hand, so there were no computers. He did all the design work on the dining room table over about 3 years. So it was a tremendous effort. It's beautiful. It's the nearest thing I could say is it's like flying a tiger moth, really, but with more power. So it's very, very gentle. Very small control pressures needed to turn it and climb and descend. But you've got a lot more power and a lot more speed than the tiger moth. And I think what we like to do is just show the world, look, this is actually quite a historic aeroplane. This is one of the few success stories in amateur British aviation there has been since the war. Somebody actually took this from a piece of paper and saw it right through to fly it. And we all know that perhaps out of 100 people who want to build an aeroplane, maybe only 2 or 3 actually finish them. And they're from a kit. This aeroplane is from a straightforward drawing board. I'm going to design and build an aeroplane. He kept going until he finished it. And then he flew it and it works and it's very nice. So it is a very historic aeroplane, I think. And it's very much what the PFA is about, I think. It's about saying to people, look, here is a way that you can do this if you really want to. You can design and build something that's unique to you, and they will, with their engineering cover, advise you and help you through that process. If you really want to do it, it is a big effort.
Microlights and other small light aircraft also feature strongly at the rally. This is the CFM3 Streak Shadow.
There are about 350 of these flying around the world. They have an amazing record. They're very, very safe to fly because they don't stall in the traditional sense of stalling. They don't spin like a normal aircraft do. They have complete control at the stall so that you can fly very, very slowly. They are very survivable too. In all that time, that's since 1983, there have been no fatalities, no major accidents. And as a result of that, it makes a very good training aeroplane. The Shadow is, the Streak particularly is a lovely aeroplane to fly. It's a side stick, it's a bit like an F-16. If you've seen an F-16 with the side stick operating here. It has trim controls on the button, this particular one does, so that you can actually trim the aeroplane as you're flying it. It is very responsive in all movements, in pitch, roll and yaw. It's fast. It's also very nice to fly in because it's a relaxed, reclined flying position, rather like a glider. They're a great deal of fun to fly.
The diesel engine is not normally associated with aircraft, but this PL02 Dieselis is a prototype powered by a turbo diesel straight out of a Vauxhall Corsa. Although diesels are heavier than normal engines, they're generally far more reliable and efficient than petrol engines, a particular advantage when you're 2,000 feet in the air. The increasing popularity of light aviation and home building in the UK means the PFA rallies will go from strength to strength in the new millennium.
Thanks a lot, see you again next year. Bye now.
There was a time when air racing was a blue-ribboned event, every bit as glamorous and exciting as Formula One motor racing is today. Sadly, most of the crowds have gone, but much of the sport's inherent excitement remains alive and kicking. The Schneider Trophy is one of the most famous sporting names in the world, and today it's fought out over the skies of Bembridge on the Isle of Wight at the beginning of July. The event kicked off with the utterly butterly barnstormers, typifying the kind of entertainment that used to intersperse the racing. We sent a camera up with wingwalker Juliet Pendleton and pilot Mike Denneth to give you a better idea of what the view is like from the top wing of a Boeing Stearman.
left round, the smoke goes on. Please take your problems into it. And upside down now. The test of the blueprint. For a good breakfast, you can use it almost like a propeller. So, ladies and gentlemen, Juliet, lying down on the job.
Although the weather wasn't perfect, at least the wind had died down in time for the Schneider race. The race is a handicap over 5 laps, with the aircraft with the slowest declared speed starting first. Not surprisingly, one of the slowest and oldest was this Oster, which averaged 117.1 miles per hour. There were many races within the race, with aircraft dipping below each other as they turned over the airfield. The result of the handicapping means that all of the aircraft arrive at the finishing line virtually together. It's a dramatic finale to a legendary race, which this year was won by Bruce Hoop, flying a Grumman AA-1 at an average speed of 126.8 miles per hour.
Only tactics that I've discovered myself over the years, and they're not terribly sophisticated. It's straightforward, very accurate flying. You need to navigate very accurately between the turning points. You need to turn not necessarily as hard as you can, but certainly very smartly, not to lose height, not to gain height, and above all, not to lose speed. And that's basically it. With the navigating, I do mean if, for argument's sake, there's a crossroads directly on track, you need to be directly above that crossroads, not 100 yards either side of it, directly above it. And your height, you need to maintain that accurately and continuously, because if you're going up and down, then you're losing straight line speed. So it does require a lot of concentration. Might seem a bit pathetic, but to be quite frank, after a race lasts about an hour, I feel fairly knackered. I have to say, I take my hat off to the Grand Prix drivers that do it for almost 2 hours.
July is a hectic time for any airshow enthusiast, with fly-ins, events and airshows happening all over the country. But one of the must-see shows has to be the Flying Legends. Yet again, warm sunny skies welcome those who adore the sound of pistoned engines to the biggest warbird fest of them all. One of the hallmarks of Flying Legends is the lack of gaps in the flying programme, just hot action all the way. And to help raise the temperature a notch was this naval quartet of cats: the Wildcat, the Hellcat, the Tiger Cat, and the mighty Bearcat. First off was the Wildcat, which first flew in 1937. It's accompanied by the bigger Hellcat. Next, the twin-engine Tiger Cat. And finally, the most powerful of the four, the Bearcat.
Bearcat together. Look right. The port jet of listen to the denoised.
The Tiger Cat showed that 2 engines is no handicap to handling and is the only flying example in Europe.
Look right. The port jet of listen to the denoised.
The Bearcat came into service in late 1944 and took just 10 months from drawing board to first flight. Also representing naval aviation were these French-operated Corsairs. Pilot Eric Goujon flew with a camera on his helmet to give us a pilot's insight into an air display.
The acceleration is smooth, nothing strong. You retract the gear and we turn on left to make the central axis of the runway free for the other aircraft.
The bent wing bird, as this Corsair was dubbed because of its inverted gull-type wings, was the first fighter to exceed 400 miles an hour. At first, the US Navy would not permit deck usage of the Corsair, but when the British Navy began to fly them off their smaller aircraft carriers, the US Navy was forced to follow suit.
And the line for the aircraft visitor, you can see the speed.
A special visitor to flying legends was this French-based B-17G, the Pink Lady. One of the most popular stars on the airshow scene, British crowds had been starved of B-17s since the grounding of the Sally B. The daytime partner of the RAF's Lancaster, the B-17 was one of the most important aircraft of the Second World War. Representing the United States Army Air Force were no less than 7 Mustangs. These remarkable fighters were completed in less than 4 months, following an order from the RAF. Once the Rolls-Royce Merlin, built under license by Packard, had been installed, the Mustang was transformed. It had 3 times the range and was faster than its contemporary Spitfire, the Mark 9, and so could escort bombers all the way to Germany and back again. In contrast to the roaring Merlins came a quartet of Bristol Mercury-engined aircraft, a Blenheim, 2 Lysanders and a Gloucester Gladiator. The Gladiator was commissioned during the RAF's expansion years of the mid-1930s and first arrived in operational service in 1937. The Westland Lysander was originally ordered as an Army cooperation aircraft and first flew in 1936. Its distinctive high wing and powerful Mercury engine gave it a superb short takeoff and landing capability. For this reason, it was used extensively for clandestine operations, ferrying agents and supplies into France. The Bristol Blenheim has been a stalwart of the British airshow scene for several years, since its restoration by Graham Warner and his team. The sight and sound of this magnificent machine never fails to thrill the crowd. The last of the formations was provided by no less than 10 Spitfires, representing both Merlin and Griffin engine types, elliptical and clipped wings. It was a superb spectacle, which has become the hallmark of flying legends. But the bellowing of radials and inlines announces the climax and finale of the show, as aircraft taxi out onto the grass and the hard runways. The impact of a Balbo of 34 aircraft is not just visual. The sound is equally impressive. .34 classic aircraft filling the sky is a testament to the achievement and dedication of the pilots, restorers, engineers and organisers who have toiled long and hard to keep these warbirds flying in this, the last year of the millennium. For a while it looked like it would not take place. Commitments in the Balkans crisis and elsewhere meant that the Royal International Air Tattoo held at Fairford might have to be cancelled. At the last minute there was a reprieve and the show went ahead. And what a success it was. Over 200,000 people poured in over the sunny July weekend for the biggest military air show in the world. There were over 450 different aircraft present, which meant that if Fairford was a country, it would have had the 5th biggest air force in the world. This year was particularly important as it marked the 50th anniversary of NATO. Not surprisingly then, NATO air power was the main theme of the event. But there were also display teams attending from all over Europe, including what has become one of many people's favourites, the Frecce Tricolori of the Italian Air Force. The team of 10 fly Airmachi MB339s, and their display is a dramatic combination of colour, speed and close formation flying. Fairford was also hosting the 75th anniversary of the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. The BBMF was present with its Mark II Spitfire forming part of the formation. This aircraft is the oldest flying example in the world, and this year it's flying in the markings of number 603 City of Edinburgh Fighter Squadron of the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. 603 had more kills to its credit during the Battle of Britain than any other RAF squadron. The Lancaster has had a troublesome season, with engine problems preventing its appearance at many shows in 1999. Happily, it was able to make Fairford. The F-104 was one of the first aircraft to serve the newly formed NATO. Continuing the historic theme was this Hawker Hunter F6 flown by Rod Dean. Next, a pair of French Navy F-8 Crusaders. This delta-winged Mirage 2000 is the latest version of a type that flew 40 years ago, the Mirage 4. Representing NATO's longtime opposition, the Soviet Empire, was this MiG-29 Fulcrum from the Slovak Air Force. Despite an outstanding display, it doesn't have the fly-by-wire technology usually associated with this kind of flying. The Su-27 flanker is fly-by-wire, which is why this 30-ton giant from the Ukraine Air Force looks so agile. Back on the Allies' side, and this pair of French Air Force Jaguars flew a routine that made them look welded together. During the Kosovo crisis, B-52s were stationed at Fairford, which was one of the reasons why the show was nearly cancelled. It was therefore fitting that one should be on hand, as they never fail to impress. It seems incredible that these aircraft, first designed in the 1940s, are scheduled to remain in service until the year 2040. Another bomber that flew out of Fairford during the Kosovo crisis was this B-1B Lancer. Its variable wing geometry and powerful engines enable it to put on an excellent display. The static park also had many aircraft present that took part in the Kosovo crisis. But without doubt, the highlight of the show was the appearance of the B-2 stealth bomber. Although security was tight, it didn't deter the crowds of people who flocked to marvel at this incredible-looking aircraft. It had flown all the way from its base in Missouri to attend Fairford.
Noise controls on.
The B-2's stealthy characteristics are due in part to its curvy shape. This is in contrast to the slab sides and angles of the stealth fighter. This is because the fighter is 10 years older, and the designers then didn't have the computing power necessary to calculate the curves you see on the B-2. Even if its technology is 10 years older, the F-117 Nighthawk, the stealth fighter, is still an impressive sight. Heavy lift aircraft, or HLAs, play a vital role in projecting NATO air power. The C-17 Globemaster III gave an impressive display of its abilities, including a demonstration of a short landing. This means that 6,000 more airfields and strips can be reached by the C-17 than any other airlifter or wide-bodied aircraft. Another display team who were on hand to entertain us was the Patrulla Aerobatica Aguila, the Spanish Air Force's display team. Flying their Spanish-built Casa 101 aviojets, they put on a thrilling display of formation flying and solo passes. that poignant note was the missing man formation flown by Jaguars of No. 6 Squadron, in tribute to the late King Hussein of Jordan. No. 6 Squadron was presented with the Royal Jordanian Standard, becoming the only RAF squadron to have a foreign standard. The highlight of the NATO celebrations was a line-up on the runway of aircraft representing all 19 NATO countries. And as the Cold War is long since over, a number of friendship flybys were staged. First, a Spitfire and a Yak-11. Then, an L-29 Delphin trainer and a de Havilland Vampire. A Socko Galab and Hawker Hunter were next. Then a Crusader and a MiG-29. Whilst the Crusader is of an older generation than the MiG, both are still in service. Finally, an RAF Tornado F3 flew by accompanying a Sukhoi Su-27. Coventry's 50s Festival of Flying was a display with a difference, capturing the atmosphere of a world of aviation long past and often ignored. The public enclosures enabled the crowd to get close to the aircraft whilst they were on static display and taxiing out to the runway. The organisers, Air Atlantique, had a Dakota Rapide and Twin Pioneer available for pleasure flights, and there was no shortage of takers. We sent one of our cameras up in a Twin Pioneer to get a closer look. There were some interesting and unusual formations that made the show well worth a visit. One of the first was a display of RAF basic trainers, featuring a Tiger Moth, Apprentice, Chipmunk, and a Provost. The Tiger Moth was the RAF's last biplane trainer, remaining in service until 1947. The replacement for the Tiger Moth was the Percival Prentice. It wasn't popular, however, as it couldn't perform aerobatic manoeuvres. Chipmunk was a great success and remained in service use for nearly 50 years. In fact, the last 3 were retired from the Army Air Corps at Middle Wallop only 3 years ago. The Provost was the RAF's successor to the unloved Prentice. It was an aerobatics machine that handled well. Provost remained in service until 1969. The Douglas flight was a dramatic spectacle of piston power, featuring DC-3s, a 4 and a 6. Next, there was a formation of aircraft representing the RAF's communications flight in the 1950s. 2 Pembrokes, a Devon and an Anson provided a unique vista in the sky. There were also jets of the 50s present to add some noise. Chris Hudson in his L-29 Delphin trainer performed a takeoff that made the term ground hugging look almost too literal. was also the unique sight and sound of this de Havilland vampire. The Meteor NF11 also put on a scintillating display in the hands of Dan Griffith. Finally, Canberra Whiskey Kilo 163 was there to remind us that 1999 marked the 50th anniversary of this very special aircraft and is still in service with the RAF today. The Canberra was the first British jet bomber, originally planned as a replacement for the Mosquito. If that was a tough act to follow, the Canberra certainly did not disappoint. In fact, its speed and performance were rather better than the jet fighters of the day. Like the Mosquito, it was intended to be able to fly high enough and at a speed which meant it didn't require defensive weapons. Such capability meant that the Canberra captured a number of records, especially the officially recognised point-to-point speed records, including Britain to America. Indeed, the Canberra was one of the few British aircraft built under licence by the Americans, as the Martin B-57. In its 50 years, the Canberra has proved itself a capable performer in a number of roles. Bomber, reconnaissance, night interdictor, trainer, electronic warfare, and many more. Today, we can still marvel at the Canberra's stunning performance, thanks to Classic Aviation Project's determination to keep Whiskey Kilo 163 flying.
just flaring out on touchdown. Nice, kissing the tarmac. And he'll roll out and take his parking area back at the top end. So if you're anywhere in the area where the camera actually parked earlier on, stand by, you're about to get very warm. And just running into the left-hand end, we've got the ESPS line.
Canberra today flown by squad leader Dave Piper. Probably a good time to mention the team that support the Canberra, Commander Phil Shaw.
How often have you looked up into the sky on a summer's evening only to find yourself looking into the underside of a hot air balloon? The chances are quite likely. Added to the fact that balloons make excellent billboards, you've probably seen giant Bertie Bassets, strawberries, houses, and all manner of weird and wonderful shapes and sizes in the sky. Welcome to the silent world of hot air ballooning. We visited the 21st International Balloon Fiesta held at Ashton Court near Bristol to find out more.
It's one of the best events in the world as a ballooning venue. It's 3 days flying. Bristol's a lovely city. It's a fabulous launch site here at Ashton Court. You can see with the balloons behind us we're well sheltered from the weather, so it really is a super venue. It's spectacular. The mass liftoff, seeing all the special shaped balloons, it's really quite amazing. The crowd come year after year, I think up to 300,000 people at times.
There's always an excitement of having 100 balloons around you. There's always new pilots, and so you fly with your old favourites, you meet new ones each year from different countries. There's always a challenge of flying safely amongst so many balloons. Flying right across the city is always a thrill. It's always a fantastic photo opportunity. And the amazing support we get from the citizens and the residents of Bristol. It's the centre of ballooning of Europe, really. There are thousands upon thousands of people that turn up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I love it. The whole atmosphere is a real carnival. And, you know, I enjoy being part of it. And so I'll be coming back as long as I can.
Apart from coming in many different shapes and sizes, there are also one-man balloons called hoppers.
It's a one-man balloon. You fly it in a harness. We've got a bottle of fuel, propane on our backs, and a small burner. It's about 21,000 cubic feet, which is good enough to lift someone of my weight. Let's put a bit of heat in using this handle here, and it makes us go up. And when I want to come down, I pull on this red handle here, and that lets air out the top of the balloon. And I can come down. I said I can come down.
There's very little the pilot can do to control the balloon. The supply of fuel is either on or off. The pilot controls his height by varying the time the burner's ignited. Apart from that, it's a case of going wherever the wind takes you. That, and having a reliable support vehicle to help retrieve you and the balloon. Although hot air balloons are a wonderfully safe and peaceful way to travel, there are those who need to inject a little excitement into their chosen sport. People like Ian Ashpole.
We did quite a few silly things. We were flying in a hammock last week between the Strawberry and the Sainsbury's apple, and we took that up to 7,000 feet. Sat there reading the paper, having a good time, and then eventually just fell out of it using a parachute to get down.
One of the most spectacular sights in the whole of aviation, however, must be a night glow. Over 100 balloons burn as ignited, lighting up the night sky.
When you fly in planes, you know where you're taking off from, you know where you're going to be landing, and it's all sort of staged for you. Whereas when you're flying a balloon, it's very much the unknown. You take off, and it's a different flight every single flight. You fly over something new, you see something new. Even if you're flying over the same area, you always see something new. And the landing's always sort of an interesting part. You don't know where you're going to land, sort of the reception you're going to get when you get there, when you're going to have thousands of kids running out. So it's the variety, the change. There's no 1-2 flights are the same.
In the past, the last shows of the season have been criticised for being a bit lacklustre after the spectacle of flying legends. This year, however, things were different, for the organisers pulled out all the stops and put on a truly magnificent show. The theme was a century of air power, and that's exactly what we got. The skies were filled with formations of aircraft linked to a particular moment in the development of aerial combat. Thus the show opened with a recreation of a First World War dogfight. A Fokker triplane had to fend off an SE-5A, a Sopwith triplane, and a Newport, which was making its first appearance in this country. To make sure the job was done properly, the Shuttleworth Collection's Bristol fighter had come up from Old Warden. This was one of the most successful aircraft built by any country during the First World War, proving itself adept at reconnaissance, air combat and ground attack. In fact, some have called it the mosquito of its day. It was that good. Some aircraft even remained in service during the 1930s, helping the RAF police some of the outer reaches of the British Empire. We then moved forward in time to the early years of the Second World War, and the era of the Spitfire, the Hurricane, and its archenemy, the Messerschmitt Bf 109. The Fairy Swordfish is one of the most popular aircraft on the airshow circuit, yet it's neither fast, noisy or capable of aerobatics. We visited Yeovilton, where the Royal Naval Historic Flight fly their two venerable Swordfish.
The Historic Flight was formed in 1972 by the amalgamation of the units which were then looking after a Sea Fury, a Firefly, and the Swordfish LS-326, which you see down there. And they all came together into one unit, amalgamated with the Heron Flight here at Yeovilton, and they were called the Historic Flight.
The Swordfish played as important a role in naval aviation during the Second World War as the Spitfire did for the Royal Air Force. It was used to decisive effect during the Battle of the Atlantic, crippling the mighty Bismarck. It could fly so low that the ship's guns were unable to arc downwards to fire at them. But it was also vulnerable to attack from other aircraft, and many crews lost their lives as a result.
The purpose of the Historic Flight is to be seen at displays up and down the country, and to be a living memorial to all those who have served in the Fleet Air Arm and the Royal Naval Air Service.
So what are these old biplanes really like to fly?
It's big, heavy, very stable, not a lot of power. I mean, the power is adequate, but once you get towards its normal cruise speed, you open and close the throttle, all that changes is the noise, really. One of the great things about the Swordfish was its tremendous utility. It was designed as an aircraft to operate from an aircraft carrier, and its success was that it could handle that both in terms of strength and in terms of reliability. And you couldn't start in reliability terms at a better place than talking about the engine. This is the last mark of the Swordfish's Pegasus 30, 750 horsepower, fixed pitch propeller and a single stage supercharger. Amazingly reliable. There were wartime experiences of people who had cylinder heads shot away and the engine kept going. And we find it to be reliable as well. They're very well looked after. Another bit of utility is how to start the aircraft. You can see a starting handle sticking out the side of the airplane. That is literally how we start the airplane. Two men crank up an inertia starter, the pilot clutches it in, and the engine starts, usually on the second or third turn of the prop. Why is that so useful? Well, because there's no electrics, is there? You've got two sailors on a wind-blown flight deck. They're generally there. They don't go unserviceable. Another excellent aspect of design with regard to carrier operations is the aircraft's undercarriage. An immensely robust and forgiving piece of equipment, spreading the load path across the fuselage. You can see the wheels towed in, shock absorption, able to take landings on the small, hugely pitching aircraft carriers of the operations of those times. Of course, the aircraft was designed to operate from an aircraft carrier, and so the wings must fold. And that's a mandrolic exercise. This red handle here, carefully locked and latched for flight, is unpinned and clipped, pulled up, and that withdraws pins that run up and down the hollow strut. Meanwhile, you've got one or two men on the wingtip, and they then walk the wing back, and they clip onto jury struts underneath the tailplane. And as I say, an operation over and done with and secure in 30 seconds.
But should such rare old aircraft still be flying?
I'm totally committed to the endurance of the flying side of our aviation heritage. I recognise the importance of the museum, but I think it's equally important that our airworthy aircraft are taken out to the public. We show these aircraft to over 3.5 million people every year, and that way we're taking the tribute to the people who flew them in war out to the public, and we're also showing today's and the next generation our aviation history.
Back at Duxford, the latter years of the piston-engined fighter were represented by aircraft such as the Hawker Sea Fury. By way of contrast, there was then a display by aircraft and helicopters representing the role aviation has played in supporting the army. The formation included displays by an Oster and a trio of helicopters, a Belle Sioux, a Sud-Est Alouette and a Belanca Scout. The early years of the jet were represented by a new arrival in the UK, a Lockheed T-33, resplendent in Thunderbird's display team livery. The T-33 was partnered with a Czech-built L-39 Albatros. One of the highlights of the show was the display given by the transport element of the Avro Anson, the Douglas DC-3 and the Junkers Ju-52 tri-motor. The last years of the Second World War were represented by some of the mighty strike aircraft that brought havoc to northern France in the run-up to D-Day. The B-25 Mitchell, A-26 Invader and P-47 Thunderbolt provided a thrilling demonstration of their awesome power. Finally, it was the turn of the modern jets. First, the Tornado. And finally, it was left to the Harrier to bring down the curtain on what had been an excellent show, and indeed, on this review of the 1999 season. we hope you'll agree that even if things hadn't looked promising at the start of the year, it was in fact an excellent season, with many highlights that will linger on in the memories for years to come.